You want to
Okay.
just start from the beginning?
No, no. Let's keep it going.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just keep it going. Let's keep going.
Are you
Yeah, yeah, because it took a while. I just had to really press it to click it. So yeah.
all right? Sorry, guys, but I'm having like heat flashes. But what I was trying to say is like having a mother who comes from a different cultural background and just like raised with a whole different mentality. You know, my grandma, the family, the structure, life structure in Sudan is much different than America. So when my mom migrated to the U.S. with four children, she migrated with the mindset that her mom taught her, you know, when it comes to raising children. So a lot of our childhood was very strict and abnormal to the average American lifestyle. So I feel like that created a lot of problems because we are trying to adjust to our new environment and like fit in with friends and like, you know, live the American lifestyle. Meanwhile, my mom is trying to preserve the African traditions and like raise her children how her mother raised her, what she knew, you know? So that caused a lot of conflict, especially between her and my older sister, because my older sister, we're what, 5 years apart. So especially with them, are we 5 years apart? Yeah. Especially with them, my sister being a teenager and my mom being a fob at that point, it's just like they never seen eye to eye.
Mm.
But like growing up now, I give my mom a lot of grace because I got to go back home and see the type of lifestyle she lived before migrating to the US, just seeing what she grew up on. So I understand why she did what she did growing up, but it caused a lot of trauma. It caused a lot of it just childhood was horrible. So like once I started realizing that my childhood was really, really fucked up, I started just disassociating much more with my family because I realized that the type of lives that they led was not a life that I wanted to live, you know? And like when it comes to family, it's a repetitive pattern. Like history always repeats itself. And of course, we share the same genes. So a lot of the times we have a lot of similar characteristic traits. We're
Mm.
having a lot of the same tendencies, habits. But you can break away from that cycle. And like I really decided I wanted to break away from that cycle. And let me give you guys background. When I say that cycle, I mean like alcoholism, abuse, verbal and physical, just negative mindset, just not trying to really find your true self and like your purpose in life, you know, always restricting yourself. So once I realized that a lot of my family members just had qualities that I didn't want to have and led lives that I didn't want to lead, I had to remove myself from that picture, you know? So like today, it's really hard on me because I have evolved and like morphed myself into a whole different person that I created, you know, like it's not any traits or anything that I picked up from my mom. It's not something that was in the family lineage. So now that I have these traits and personality, like now that I just see life differently, it's really hard for me to fall back into my family's footsteps. And like right now, a lot of them are in the same places, and I have to help them a lot. And I feel like it takes away from like what I could be doing for myself, you know? Like that's not to say that I don't want to help my family. Like of course I want to help them, but it's hard helping people who never learn from mistakes, you know, who never grow, who are always doing the same things that they're doing 6 years ago. So it's like at some point you can't be graceful to that anymore. And so yeah, when it comes to family, I just feel like they can either take you down or they can bring you up. And unfortunately, my family's done nothing but take me down, like mentally especially. So yeah, I'm tired.
I got a good question for you actually. Um, Obviously considering like where your cultural background of your family and whatnot, like what does being the savior like feel like to you? Like how does it feel having to be that person that feels like you have to like pick every person in your family up to kind of like either be there for them or help them and like um even just talking to them like consistently, like knowing that you're in a different place now, like does it feel draining, or do you feel good about it? Like, how do you feel about that?
It's really exhausting and it's really unfair to me. And I've started to realize more how unfair it is to me because it's like when it comes to it, I don't have that person in them for
Mm,
me.
mm,
Like, and it sucks. So it's just like everyone expects me to help do this, help do that, but then it's like who's gonna help me? No one even like checks up on my well being. Like, no one really knows how my life is going, and that's just because they all assume that Hala just always has it together. So
mm.
like being that savior is really unfair, and I don't like that pressure being put on me. I mean, I'm grateful that I can be in the position I am to help my family, but it's really unfair to me because I feel like I shouldn't have to take on such a big responsibility.
And that's real because I feel like us being black, sometimes like when we finally get to that new place in our lives where it's like whatever that looks like, whether it's like money or it's like mentally, whatever, and it's like knowing that you have that attachment to your family, you want to help them, but then like you also start to understand like the same reason that you wanted to kind of push them away.
Exactly.
And I don't think I have that kind of family. I feel like I actually find myself gravitating back more towards family. If anything, I feel like for me it wasn't necessarily the opposite way around, but it was like we knew like we were always together. Me and my families were always together. Um, but there was a lot of arguing growing up. Like there was a lot of arguing. It wasn't always constructive, and it was lots of yelling. And for me, like it feels like we all kind of grew up in the same household, but different household at the same time. And
Mm,
so, like, there were points where I was like, man, like, I want to kind of find my own, and I want to kind of do my own thing. I want to kind of, grow into myself. But once I did, or once I feel like, and I still feel like I'm like growing into myself, like trying to figure out like where I could be, where I should be. I find myself calling back to like my family, like in our good moments, like, and understanding that like we all understand where we used to be, but we are also not all in that same place. But it is different because I feel like my family also had to kind of grow out of the same stage too of
mm,
like being stuck in a certain either a certain time period or a certain mental state. Like, my brothers they all had very different lives. Like I feel like I had a very different life, and even though we grew up in the same household, it feels like we were pulling from different feelings of inspiration, motivation, and um, but even then, like I feel like now I still feel that need to like want to help as well, but I'm always not in the condition to. And
mm,
then I feel bad about that, but I also know that at least again, this is like I feel like for my family, I know they're all working to try to help themselves and better themselves, and it's a very different kind of switch to what you're going through. But I do feel sometimes that growing sense of like trying to save people because I feel like I didn't have that growing up. So I feel like I've had to kind of, or I felt like I needed to return that favor, whether it's to friends or to family or to my siblings. Like, I feel like if I don't have a couple dollars, but if we could split $1.50, then we could split $1.50, and that's just kind of how I feel like I kind of conditioned myself to be like as I've grown up, but also understanding now that it's okay to not have it and it's okay to not be there. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them, but it also means that you have to be realistic about where you're at too. So I think realizing now, like, okay, like even if I do get to a place, I might not necessarily be there mentally. And I'm still trying to get to where I need my mental to be, even though I
mm,
might be like maybe set financially, or maybe I'd have a new place, or maybe I have this other thing going on. Like, doesn't necessarily mean that I can give anything in that moment because I'm just now reaping the benefits of what I was trying to get to. And I need to kind of I'm not used to being able to sit in the things that I've won. And so
That is, yes, like
yeah,
being
yeah.
able to actually enjoy your achievements, like your milestones, like taking pride in that is just like, yeah, because that was my last week.
Mm,
Like, I had a pretty good accomplishment, but I couldn't even sit down and grasp it because it's just problems coming at me left and right. And honestly, it's really sad because it just makes you feel like you accomplished nothing, like
mm,
everyone emphasizes how well you're doing, but it's like you can't even sit down and enjoy that because you have a thousand problems behind that success that's overshadowing it.
and it kind of sucks because it's like it really kind of showcases like what trauma can do in the face of achievement. Like even if you feel like you did this like super big thing, like if somebody from your family just randomly calls you and that can just trigger a whole feeling of like, oh my gosh, like you can just get exhausted and tired all over again. So it's like, I'm trying to figure out like how to balance that too. Like, and again, that's not to say it's my family, but it's like there might be people in my life where it's like I know I want to help them, but I cannot do anything for them right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've had to have that conversation with some people like hey, like I know we're friends, but I physically have nothing to give right now because I'm too busy trying to give back to myself. And yeah, so
Yeah. And I want to go back to what you said when you said that you and your siblings experienced different childhoods. I actually came across this psychologist who was explaining how even children living in the same household, same parents and everything, no two children experience the same childhood. And that's just because you're born at different times. So, like, regardless how close you guys are born to each other, your parents are always growing and changing. So, it's like at different aspects of their lives, they had a different kid at each aspect, so they're a
mm,
different person. And then just growing up, like your parents and like they treat their children differently. It's like no child gets the same treatment as the next child. And I experienced that growing up too. Like, and I mean, looking at how we've all grown up now, it's pretty obvious too that although we all lived in the same household, we didn't experience the same childhood. And
mm,
it's due to our own mental capacities, like what we could let go of, what we can move on from, what we let determine next steps. But it also is from like how your parents treated and raised you, how much attention they gave one child compared to the other, how much support, how much admiration and like validation they gave one child compared to the other. And then like parents sometimes have a tendency of comparing children,
mm,
like, oh, your brother's doing this, your sister's doing that. And like for me, that's one thing that really affected me growing up is I was always the comparison child. Like my mom always compared what my siblings were doing to me. Like, oh, Holla's doing this. Like, you guys need to be doing what Holla's doing. You guys need to do this. You guys need to do that. And it's just like, you
mm.
don't want to be that comparison child because unwillingly it creates envy from your siblings
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
just like, oh, they can clearly see that a parent might have picked a favorite based off those comparisons. And that's really hard because it kind of creates a drift between you and your siblings,
Mm. That you might not even have asked for.
at all.
And it's like you don't really figure that out till like years later. Whether it's through like conversation or if you guys have like a physical altercation or something, like
Hmm.
it never really showcases itself until it's like at like a peak, and then you guys have like a heated argument or like a fight or something. Then it's like,
Hmm. And everything's brought to the table.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. It's funny because like I feel like I don't think that was really super present in my family, but um, I do think that like I do think it's very interesting how because me and my brothers all have age gaps, like pretty significant age gaps. And so I feel like they've not only have we lived in the same house, but like we all have like a it's like my one of my older brothers is like 4.5 years older than me. So he's lived an entire life. Like, when he went to Iowa State, he was here 4 years before me. So him being gone, it felt like I never really saw him. Like throughout his span of being in college because he was in Ames most of the time.
Mhm.
So that was the first time in my life where it was just me and my younger brother. And at that point, it felt like that was when like the dynamic changed because it was like, oh, like he's not there, and the he was kind of like the lead. I want to say quote unquote. Like he was like, we took him to his first job. Like we were all in the car when he got his first job, and he was in high school, and we had never seen what high school was like. So we kind of lived vicariously through him and some of the things that he did. And but
Mm.
once he left, that was the first time it was just like me and my little brother. And then I was in high school, but he wasn't in high school yet. So I had a whole time of just being in high school, but I didn't really like have like an identity in high school. I felt like I was like so to myself and I was so quiet that I kind of found myself through like literally just like listening to music and like just sports like but like in that essence like that was when I realized like I like actually have to figure this thing out like who am I and like who am I outside of my brothers,
Mm.
because a lot of people like would know my older brother or maybe they might know my younger brother and they might see me but then they might be like, oh, like he's like super quiet, like, oh, he's like I don't really know anything about him. But like I think that was the first time where I've had to like really had to come into grips with like kind of like figuring out how to develop myself, like what what morals do I want to stand on, what do I want to start speaking up on, like how do I want to start dressing, like all these things, like how do I want to deal with certain friends and friendships, like
Did you like that or not like that? Because I feel like in moments like that, it's like you're creating yourself without any standards based off like what your brother had going on,
mm,
like no one expected you to be any sort of way since like you said they didn't know who your older brother was. So did you enjoy that phase of not having like a leader, like a role model?
it yes and no. And I think it's slightly because like so people like knew my older brother, but it was also like it just so happened that we went to the same high school. So people knew who I was off of knowing him. And so through that, I've kind of mentally was like, I'm going to create my own person.
Mm.
Like I was already a really solo kind of child, but like once I got into spaces where it was like, oh, you look just like him, I was already like, yeah, no, I'm gonna be my own person, whatever that looks like.
Yes.
Um, and even when I got to college, it was kind of like the same thing. I kind of had to like refine myself again because we went to the same school. And so when I got here, everybody was like, "Oh, you're Trey's brother." I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." So I got to do this thing all over again. But it's really interesting because um people like will always see similarities in you and your siblings, but like it's truly is up to you to create your own like who you are and establish who you are because you can get caught in the limelight of your siblings, but you also have to like kind of stand up for yourself too and you have to be present a lot. Like you have to go to spaces and tell people who you are and what you like to do and
Mhm.
the things that you want to do because yeah, me and my brother like a lot of things, but we might not do them the same.
Yeah.
So, he might do one thing this way or he might do this thing that way, but the way I would go about it is completely different. So it's like, but I have enjoyed the journey of being able to create my own like sense of style, my own sense of like I don't know, just my own essence like about who I am, like who Taylor is cuz I'm like I know I'm my own person, but it does it did slightly feel like when I got here it was like it felt like I had to live up to a certain kind of standard
Yeah.
because I won't lie and say that he didn't set a certain standard for how involved he was like in the community here. But it was also like I'm gonna be involved, but it might not be in the same way. Um, but I think, and honestly, me sticking around, I think people know me for me now,
Period.
as opposed to knowing me from my
Associating you
brother.
guys together.
Yeah,
Yep.
and granted, like there's so many different age groups. Like he's literally 4.5 years older than me, so there's gonna be people around his age who are gonna be like, "Oh, you're Trey's brother," but that's because they went to school with him. I'm
Right.
not gonna beat him up for that. But it has been a journey trying to um like really think about like, man, like I've had to really grow into this person. And
Yes.
so kind of getting back to the whole like savior helping people thing, it's like we're still growing and we're still trying to identify what it is we can tolerate and what it is we can't. And even with growing, I feel like I could tolerate a lot, but really I can't.
No, you don't. Yeah.
I actually can't tolerate as much as I think I can. I think I just get scared of the word no sometimes, or
Oh
the
no, you got to step out of that because that used to be me too. Just well, people like to term it people pleasing, but it's not necessarily even to please the people.
hmm
It's to please yourself. Like
yeah,
you
yeah.
want to go out your way to help the next person. Like it fulfills you, and that's how I feel. Like it's really hard for me to say no to things that are taken away from like what I got going on, or like just making my life harder by helping somebody else out.
hmm
So yeah, I feel that.
That's a good point. I've never actually heard it expressed that way. Like, and it's kind of going back to what we were talking about the last podcast. Like, you can just do good things and it not be on some like you're doing it because you want these people to feel good. That in itself is a good feeling, but it's like I actually do like to take care of people.
Like it's just for me, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to accept that about myself. I'm like, I enjoy helping people. Like
hmm
that's something that fills my cup, and I like there's limits to it. You have to find the balance because like you said, it can take like what's the word you used? Tolerance. Like see, yeah, tolerance. Like what you can tolerate,
Okay.
there's
Okay.
a balance to it. But we only have a little bit time left, and I wanted to touch on one more subject,
hmm
and that's like how you said you can create yourself, like reinvent who you are. I feel like you can also create a family. Like
Oh
one
yeah.
thing that I've learned within the past, like I will say 4 years, because I had like a really horrible altercation with my mom in 2020, and it was like to the point where we just like completely cut each other off. And at that point, it was the holidays. And like, I didn't go to like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then New Year's, and then my birthday's right after New Year's. I didn't talk to my mom for all four of those holidays. And one of my closest friends at the time, who like was also a family friend, so like my mom knew their mom, like we all would hang out together. They like took me in and like showed me what family structure should look like. Like
hmm
they showed me a whole different side to family, and I'll never forget them for that, because that was probably the best Christmas I ever had. Like they got me Christmas gifts. I really never received Christmas gifts.
Wow.
They like fire ass Thanksgiving dinner.
hmm
They gave me a birthday present. Like it was just the most amazing experience ever. And from that moment on, I realized that the word family doesn't have to mean genes. Like you don't have to be genetically related to consider someone your family. And once I like came to that realization, I created my own family. And like
hmm
friends I think are one of my most prideful, like I love my friends so much. Like they bring a part to my life that I don't think my family could even do for me. Like they
hmm
nourish me, they understand me, like they really care for me. And experiencing that type of love from people that you aren't related to goes to show that there's just so much love out there, and it doesn't have to all come from family. Because I feel like this society tries to emphasize family structure so much. Like you need to love your family, you need it, like family's all you got, blood this, blood that. And it's like, no, not everyone is lucky enough to have that dynamic.
Oh yeah.
So don't count yourself out from experiencing that family love, though, because you can create your own family.
And even within the typical family dynamic, if you have that one, that in itself might not be enough. There's lots of families who they look happy, happy go lucky, and then you never know what's going on in people's families.
At all.
And so there's a
Ugh.
reason sometimes for people to cling on to their friends the way they do or the people around them is because they probably don't have that same dynamic with their own family.
Yes.
And even and it's funny because even I love my family and I love the way we interact, but also like going back into the coming to your own, like I had to create my own kind of community of people that I like to be around. And honestly, it's trial and error actually.
Yeah.
It actually is trial and error because you think you have it at first, and then it's like, whoa, this isn't what I thought it was. So now you have to go back to the drawing board, rethink it, which people that you don't want, which people you don't like, and then you gotta like somehow figure out how to exit it and start all over again. Or maybe if there's one from the old community you want to take with you, and then but you got to figure out how to navigate that. But like ultimately, it does come down to like creating your own family, creating your own community. Because once you once you figure out that, I feel like life is just figuring out which people are going to be around you when you're at like your lowest.
Yeah.
And so when you're at that point, that's when you recognize who's going to be your family and who's going to be your community. Now it does take some effort of communicating that too.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that I put together my family of friends in a day. Like you
Hmm.
said, definitely trial and error. You're definitely going to meet people who you think are going to be in your life forever, or who you think have the best interest of heart. But yeah, you just have to learn what what morals and traits people have that resonate with the type of friendship you want to curate compared to what they're putting on the table. And if it's not matching up, then yeah, you do have to move on.
Hmm. Where we at on?
We gotta wrap this.
Yeah, but all right, y'all. Thank you for coming for our session on yapology. Uh,
This one was a good one. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you guys all have amazing families or friends.
yeah, and continue to work on yourself. Peace.